Well, the consuming of plastic products is probably one of the main agent of pollution in our society. Just because of our lifestyles, where people are always in a hurry, they don't usually have time to go back home, and it's because it's so much more functional comparing to the traditional dishes that we have. So the plastic products are something that if we want to find solution about diminishing pollution, plastic products will be a priority product to analyze. If we're talking about recyclable dishes, like something that I believe you are interested in developing, there are countries where they are already very well established. Some countries actually they are prohibiting the use of traditional plastic dishes, for instance, or not necessarily also the plastic one, but the one that is not recyclable. For instance, I've heard that in a city like New York, it's prohibited now that the street restaurants offer their food to go on something that is not recyclable, on dishes that are not recycled. So there are laws that are already put into place to punish the consuming of plastic goods. And obviously there are also one main situation that is probably not as well developed in Mexico. The people are more in Europe in general, and in countries such as United States or Canada, they are more friendly, eco-friendly people, and much more aware, and also they are willing to pay more for a product like that if they know this is going to have a positive influence on all this pollution, on all this strategy that people are developing to diminish pollution. In a country such as Mexico, there has been great effort to implement environmental education in schools, in educational systems. However, these processes are more applied in primary school, in secondary school, and in the case of the University of Guanajuato, it's already pretty well implemented at the prepa. However, if we observe the upper levels of studies, such as bachelor degrees or master's degrees, I believe there is a great effort to do to add environmental education in our programs, which is not, I believe, very present, or in a very. It depends on the professor who is teaching, how much he knows about the concept. And I know as a professor that I've never been taught environmental education as a additional course that we could have for educational programs. So that's something that I would say that, first of all, in order to implement this use of recyclable dishes in a university like the University of Guanajuato, it has to go along with environmental education and with some political instructions. For instance, to prohibit to all the cafeterias at the schools that they use regular plastic dishes, and look for suppliers, for instance, a company such as yours, to provide them to establish maybe an agreement. But as long as it's not going to be compulsory, as long as it's going to be an option, and as long as it's going to be cheaper to buy regular plastic dishes, I don't think it's going to work. We need to be more strict on this implementation, because if we're talking about students, most of the students who are coming here to study, they don't have a lot of money to pay for their expenses while they are out of their town, and so that's financial restrictions, and you have to decide whether to buy some food and buy a regular plastic product. They will decide for the first options. So this is something that needs to be worked, and especially it has to come from the top authorities down to all the level of the university, and including the educational programs, to make it like more integrated. Oh, that's an obvious answer to your questions. Of course, it's viable, and I believe there is probably more opportunities for this product overseas than here in Mexico. In Mexico, because this product will apply to bigger profile of consumers, not only the high status profile of consumers, those who are willing to pay more for a product, because you haven't told me about the cost of producing this kind of product, but usually environmental, eco-friendly products tend to be more expensive for many reasons. Sometimes these are mainly psychological reasons, but they are also sometimes also rely on the cost of productions, and so it depends. But they are just thinking about the European market, the United States, Canada. They are avid of these kind of products. So that's a very obvious answer to your questions. Yes, it's totally viable, and yes, you should even do a very strong benchmarking analysis of how these products are being distributing in these overseas markets, in order to see how you can apply it in Mexico. Mm-hmm. There are like a new kind of Mexican consumer right now in Mexico, and I'm thinking about, for instance, this new generation of young people, the millennials, who are considered the first generation who is very sensitive to ecological problems, issues, and very soon this segment of population, the millennials, will be the majority of consumers who will spend money to make the economy work. So there will be a social impact, not just because of the use of plastic, of recyclable dishes. It's the whole movement. I believe there is in general like a third revolution in Mexico, social revolution. You had already two revolutions in Mexico, and I believe we are every 100 years. It seems that there is a revolution in Mexico, historically speaking, and we are right in the third anniversary of the first revolution in Mexico, and this time it's a social revolution. You can see how people are more conscious about their rights, but also their obligation, and how to interact with each other, with all these social networks and all these things. And there is definitely a very high priority right now in all this social communication, all the communication you could observe, you can see, and in the daily life, you can see that people are more and more aware of the necessity to be more eco-friendly as part of other social as part of a more socially responsible behavior in general. So it's a great opportunity for companies to try to adapt their classic products, such as a plastic dish, to a more eco-friendly product, and this is the case. This is, as a great example, is the product that you are trying to distribute. So there will be a social impact, ecological impact, of course, but again, we are not just talking about millennials. Millennials are just about 30% of the population. We still have 70% of people who, some of them are not very eco-friendly because they're ignorant about the situation or because of their lack of financial capacity to adopt more ecological products. So the only way you could have a more ecological impact and makes it like a law that has to be punished. And if you put a law to make it as compulsory the use of recyclable dishes, you have to offer an alternative to people. It's like, just take the example of plastic bags. There are some, I believe it's in city of Mexico, Mexico City, that's the first time the city installed as a law not to offer plastic bags for people who were doing their grocery in regular supermarket. And people were upset because they thought it was a great idea, but how I am going to carry my grocery back home? And this is when the supermarkets started to offer some alternatives, such as recyclable bags, or that would be very attractive, very good looking. And this is the way you need to put a law, and again, suggest an attractive alternative to obey the law. Otherwise, Mexican people will try to evade the law, as for instance, if we you have to make it attractive. That's the law. So especially in a country such as Mexico, where people tend to obey the law only if it's convenient. If it's not convenient, they will evade the law. Well, as I already answered, I guess I already answered this question. It's put in place laws, because it's too easy. It's still too easy to buy products that are not eco-friendly. That's definitely. Then you have to promote the use of eco-friendly products. Use, for instance, the social networks. Mexicans are very sensitive to social network. Try to find influencers, early adopters, that will, and I think this will be a great strategy. I'm thinking about marketing strategy here. Make it more compulsory environmental education. I believe there are still a great majority of people who just don't know, or are not just aware about how their individual consuming affect the general pollution of their environment, how to relate cause effect. And I think there is a great work to do in this aspect, because we are talking about climate change, for instance, but I believe that's too general for people who are more conscious about how the individual consuming affect the pollution, that's fine. But for someone who doesn't have this idea, or for someone who's just is ignorant about that, we need to put in place some environmental education, and start with the children. Children are how do you say? Children are heroes in Mexico. If they are kings, so that they are the one who eventually will push the adults, the growing adults, who are more difficult to convince to change their habits, but they will be more willing to obey to the an invitation of their child, of the young children, to just because they feel ashamed, they feel embarrassed, or just because they want to please them. So that's why I think it's a good thing that there has been some effort done for environmental education in primary schools and in kindergarten, but that's not enough. We still have to and again definitely use early adopters, influencers, and try to also give some incentives for companies such as yours to develop their entrepreneurships, to put into companies that are more socially responsible. And when I'm talking about socially responsible, that includes environmental responsibility, and not just focus on the high society, but try to figure out how you can find some similar products that could be affordable to a majority of people in Mexico, because the majority of people in Mexico don't have that much access to money. That's the reality. So, and these products is probably more it's going to be probably more attractive to high income people. That's I would say so. Mm-hmm. And be convinced, and people like you, if you are passionate about your project, if you are convinced about the profit of this project, not just for you as entrepreneurs, but also for society, just be patient, because it's very hard. It's very hard to create new businesses, but if you are convinced about that, it's going to work. So good luck.
Thank you.